Hello there. What's going on, everyone? Today we're going to be looking at a fun new game from Awaken Realms called Knockdown. This is a 1 versus 1 brawler game where you're going to be trying to knock your opponent down. It's going to be set in the Siege Storm universe, and Awaken Realms has been one of my favorite companies. They have made some of my absolute favorite games. You may have heard me talk about a little game called Nemesis. If you're a fan of that, you may want to check this out, because there's some cool little stuff we'll talk about towards the end of the video. But for now, let me show you guys Knockdown. Now, one of the first things you're going to notice about Knockdown is that your fighters are going to start out the game ready to face each other, and the game board does kind of resemble one of those like 1990s, 2000s 2D arcade fighting games, and that's certainly by design, because the gameplay is certainly meant to inspire you to remember those type of games. But also the board itself comes from the game board box, rather. The box is going to transform into the game board, which is a really cool thing about this game. I think that is just absolutely tremendous that they've done this. You're going to be starting your characters off. They're going to fight each other. We're going to be doing actions, and you're going to be getting cards, playing cards, doing combo attacks. We're going to take a look at the character cards and all the different components. Now, I do want to caution you, everything you're going to see here is just a prototype. Certainly the final product will be a little bit different from this, but this should give you a kind of a good idea of how the game plays. Now, you're going to see cards laid out at the beginning of the game. You're going to have 4 cards kind of laid out in front of the game box, and these are going to be cards that you can take when somebody takes the draw a card action. It's going to put cards in your hand that you're going to use to trigger your combos, but also it's going to give you the opportunity to attack when you take them. And we're going to talk a little bit more about how attacks work, but it's important to know that there are going to be 4 cards set out here. You're going to have some cards in your hand from the starting cards. We're going to start off with those. And there are also skill cards. You're going to start out with a skill card. We'll talk a little bit more about these later because they're going to change a little bit of the basic gameplay. Now, basically, you're going to be going back and forth, and it's the first player to win 2 of 3 rounds. You play best 2 out of 3. Again, very similar to a lot of the old arcade-style fighting games. Now, how do you actually win a round? Great question, because it's actually quite simple. You have to knock down your opponent. And to knock down your opponent, you're going to be giving them wounds. There's 2 types of wounds. For the prototype, we're using these little wooden cubes. We've got light wounds, which we'll be designating with the light cubes. And then we've got heavy wounds, which we'll use the darker cubes for. And the big difference between light wounds and heavy wounds are that, well, heavy wounds are worse because they cannot be healed. You can rest and get rid of half of your light wounds, which is cool because these are basically healable damage. But once you take heavy wounds, they're not healable damage anymore. And that's all said and good, but how many wounds do you have? Well, nobody has a specific wound threshold, but I would say there's an estimate of approximately 10 for most characters. And the reason I say that is because once somebody deals you a heavy wound, they can, at least as long as there's 1 heavy wound in the damage that you're being dealt, they can remove a heavy wound from the damage that's being dealt and trigger a knockdown challenge. And the knockdown challenge is they're trying to knock you down, and you've got 10 seconds to play a dexterity game. What? So how does a knockdown challenge work? Well, let's say I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 wounds. Somebody deals me maybe a heavy wound and a light wound, and they want to remove the heavy wound to trigger the knockdown challenge, and they say, go. I've got 10 seconds to stack all of these up. So let's just see if I can do it. So 10, 9, 8, 7, 6. I'm doing it with my left hand. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh, and I guess the higher I go, the harder it is to do. Right? So yeah, so I would be knocked out if that were the case. Of course, I probably wouldn't be using my left hand. I'd probably be using my right hand, but I wanted to try it left-handed. Maybe that's a harder variant to play, right? Try it with your non-dominant hand, but that might be not fair. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, basically, if you have more wounds than you can stack up within 10 seconds after you do a knockdown challenge and your tower falls down, you are then out. For me, I figure about 10 wounds within 10 seconds is kind of the most that I can do. So I know that my personal wound threshold here is about 10, but that might be different for different people. So the little bit of dexterity game that kind of factors into this is actually really cool. So that's basically how you win, but now let's talk about how you play. You're going to start off with 5 cards in your starting card hand. You're not going to keep all of these, but I'm going to show you just a couple of them to give you an idea of the basic symbols that we'll have on cards, because there's a couple of different things on these cards. First off, you have 5 different symbols, and most of these are used just for triggering special abilities on your character sheet, right? These are called combos. And so when you go to do a combo action, which is one of the different actions you can take, there's 4 different actions you can take. There's combo, there's draw a card, there's move, and there's rest. Okay, combo is the most powerful action that you can take. And if you're doing a combo, you're going to be looking at these symbols. However, you can also discard certain cards during your turn that happen to have this arrow symbol to get a free move, because hey, that's, you know what, that's also a free action. Move is a very simple action. That's just moving 1 space forward or 1 space backwards. It's as simple as that. If you are defending and you happen to have this symbol, the shield, you can actually discard these cards, as many of the shield cards as you want to reduce damage by that amount. So these are going to be useful for defense, but the other 3 symbols are there just for signature abilities for the most part. So while you are going to have some starting cards in hand, you're going to be getting more cards by taking the draw action. So when you take a draw action, you're going to be taking one of these cards and pulling it into your hand. And you can choose any card that is available. And of course, once at the end of your turn, once they are taken, you're going to replace them from the deck. And so more cards will come out to fill these up. When you take a card, it goes in your hand, and so you're going to have this symbol. And you basically want to draw cards that are going to fuel your combos. And I'm going to talk more about combos in a little bit. But taking a card also allows you to attempt the attack. In this case, it's a low kick. Kicks generally hit somebody that's at distance 2 of you, so that's exactly 2 spaces away. And that doesn't mean up to 2 spaces away, because if somebody's too close, you can't quite get a kick on them. So basically, think of being 1 space away from somebody as being way too close for you to swing out with a long leg, and that's better suited for a punch. If you're 2 spaces away from somebody, you are then able to be kicked by them. And so if I was 2 spaces from you and I did a draw action and took this, I would then be performing the low kick attack, which would deal a light wound. And then also I would follow whatever else it said, if there was anything on there. This is the symbol for a light wound. This is the symbol for a heavy wound. Again, the difference is because light wounds can be healed. So that's another action we're going to talk about. It's called rest. Let's just say my character here has 4 light wounds and 2 heavy wounds. If I take the rest action, I'm going to be able to just get rid of 2 of the light wounds, and so that's good. But if I do it again, then I'm only going to be able to get rid of 1 light wound, because it's only half. So there's only so much value that has. That if you start getting a lot of light wounds, you definitely want to try and rest before somebody issues a knockdown challenge to you, because again, like we showed before, those cubes can be very difficult to stack up too high. The move action is quite simple. It's moving backwards and forwards. And again, your spacing is going to be very important, because you have to be certain ranges to trigger certain attacks. And that's all going to lead into the most powerful type of attack action, which is going to be your combination. So to describe that, let's go ahead and look at some of these character cards. All right, so here I've got Zingo, and he's got 4 different abilities that are all part of his character card. Now, these are all different abilities that I can trigger when he's trying to do a combination. And the color of the abilities actually is relevant, because if they're like a gray with the white text, that means that they are abilities that can be used for combination. In the case of a defensive character like Verota, he happens to have one that's white with dark text, and that one is actually more of a defensive ability. So that one actually isn't an attack. But for right now, I'm going to talk about this one. So basically, our first one, for example, is Shaolin Rage. It's a range 1 attack, so you want to be close to somebody before you trigger this, and you can discard, or you can play up to 3 cards, and they can either be a fist or the kick symbol for each one, and then follow what it says. So in this case, it would deal a heavy wound, discard any number of cards, and deal a heavy wound for each discarded card. And so you're going to have to pay 3 to do that, to start it, and then you discard as many more cards as you want. This is a really strong ability, because heavy wounds are not usually that easy to deal. And on top of that, it also lets you do, if you have a lot of cards in hand, you could deal a lot of damage. A lot of attacks deal just like 1 or 2 damage each. This one can potentially deal like 5 or 6, depending on how many cards you have in your hand. We've got Throw. which is our next one. This one is going to cost the yin-yang symbol, and that one just deals 1 unblockable heavy wound. Again, we talked a little bit about the discarding the shield card when you're being attacked, and that can cancel a light wound or downgrade a heavy wound into a light wound, but the problem is that if it's unblockable, you can't do that. And then after that, you can change places with your opponent. This is especially nice because if you get pushed to the edge of the board, you're in a hazard space, and that means anytime you're damaged by an attack that's adjacent to you, you're going to take an extra heavy wound. So you definitely don't want to get pushed into the edge, and if somebody does that to you, you now switch places with them and throw them into the corner and surprise them. He's also got Power of the Mind, which is you can discard a defense card and something else, and you can deal an unblockable damage and move your opponent 1 space backwards. So this can push somebody away. Also, if you'll notice, this one does not have to be directly adjacent. This one has a ranged attack, and the big difference with a ranged attack, it just means you have to either be on the same. They either have to be on the top layer of hexes or the bottom layer of hexes. You have to be straight because otherwise they're sidestepping. And then he's got Equilibrium. After you end your combo, you can perform 1 additional action if you have discarded a yin-yang. So I talked all about these briefly, but the point is, when you do the combo action, you can do any number of these. You can't do the same one multiple times, but you can do all 4 of them if you want. So combo is really strong once you have a lot of cards in hand because it's most efficient to be able to do like at least 2, if not more than 2, of the different attacks that are on your combo sheet when it's your turn. Otherwise, you're better off just drawing a card and maybe being able to do the attack that's on the card. And then you're kind of building up these cards for a really big power attack. I kind of liken it as drawing cards and getting those free attacks as your basic attacks, and then your combos here are like your super moves, especially if you're able to do all 4. That's kind of like an ultimate ability. So that's kind of like the basic round structure. If these cards ever run out, then you're going to take damage each turn. And that is basically kind of like your round timer right here. Although it's kind of rare for those cards to run out because at a certain point, at least in my games, because I'm not that dexterous or don't have that much balance. For me, about 10 hit points is about the tops. But if everybody's really, really good at balance, you might have longer games. But there's one more thing that I haven't talked about yet, beyond just picking a character and having their cards kind of attack the other person, and that is the skill cards. And these are going to be something that make your character a little bit different each game. And you're going to start with one of these. There's a little mini game where you draw 3, you discard 1 and give your opponent the other 2, and they pick one of those from there, and they're going to do the same thing from you. So you're going to draw 3 and look at these and be like, think of these as buffs, permanent abilities for the whole game. The more you learn these characters, I'm playing against Veroda. Well, I can't let him have this one maybe. So I'll get rid of that one and then give him these 2. He'll be able to pick 1. And then he'll do the same thing from me. But these are nice little abilities. Like when you block, you can discard a heavy wound with a shield instead of only being able to discard a light wound or downgrade a heavy wound. So that's nice, right? So if you have a character that's really dedicated towards blocking, that one might be really good. If you have a total of at least 7 heavy wounds or 7 wounds, each time you attack, you deal additional 2 light wounds. So there's all kinds of, and there's a whole mess of these, and they're all really cool. So you're going to really get a kick out of these because they're a great way to make sure every game is a little bit different. And of course, these can go on any character. So even the same skill on one character will perform very differently on the same skill on another character. And the other cool thing about this game is that you're getting some really nice, high-quality miniatures. And you're definitely probably used to, by now, if you've backed an Awaken Realms game before, getting some awesome sculpts and getting some really good miniatures. And again, these are prototype, but this tells you a little bit how they're doing the sculpting with these really dynamic poses. They are awesome. I think you guys are going to love these. I can't wait to see what else they have for this game. And that's kind of what I want to talk about with my closing remarks. So with closing remarks, as cool as these 3 characters are, I'm definitely hoping to see more unlocked in the future. So maybe we'll see stretch goals, maybe we'll see expansions, maybe we'll see stuff from other Awaken Realms games. Now, personally, if you ask me, I'm really hoping for something from Nemesis because Nemesis is one of my top 5 games of all time. So big fan of Nemesis, but I would love to hear from you guys what you would like to see in the comments section. Let me know. Also, I want to add something else that I forgot to talk about before with the dexterity aspect. There is a dice mechanic, so where if you're not comfortable playing with the stacking of cubes, you can simply roll dice and see if you get a lower number than the amount of wounds, see if you're safe or not. So that's all out there as well. But I think that's one of the things that kind of helps this game stand out, is the fact that in addition to all this card play and strategy, now all of a sudden there's a little miniature dexterity game to keep in mind. So I think that's a fun little aspect to like what this game is bringing to your tabletop. It plays pretty quick. It's a pretty fun game as far as, you know, if you're a fan of like street fighting and 2D arcade fighter type games. I think this one's going to evoke a lot of that nostalgia and those memories, and I think you're going to have a good time with it. Now, if you're interested in learning more, check the description, because this game is coming to Kickstarter. Is going to be, I think, pretty successful. I'm pretty excited about it. But definitely be sure to check out Knockdown from Awaken Realms. I want to thank you guys so much for hanging out with me today. If you like what you saw, be sure to click that subscribe button. I do a lot more game reviews, a lot of tabletop games, a lot of miniatures games, a lot of Star Wars games, a lot of Star Wars stuff in general. I am pretty much a big Star Wars geek who likes to also play some other board games from time to time. All right, that's all I've got for you today. I want to thank you all so much. A big thanks to Awaken Realms for sending this out to me to check out for you guys. And be sure to check out the Kickstarter and give them some love. Thank you guys so much. And as always, have a great day.